Good morning, and welcome to Redeemer Lutheran Church. I'm Pastor Gary Lodeholt. As you might imagine, I have preached a lot of sermons at this point in my career, so really there are only a very few that I remember specifically without having to look at them again to be reminded of what I said. One that does stand out for me was entitled simply the letters JSR. Those letters stood for the phrase, Jesus still rules. And I taught it to the congregation early in the sermon, and then the rest of the sermon talked about the ascension of Jesus and what it meant. I pointed out countless ways things were wrong in our world, but we needed to remember that in spite of that, the ascension means, and the congregation would respond, Jesus still rules. Over and over, that phrase echoed among us, worming its way into our minds, our hearts, and our lives. I don't really know if that sermon worked for the congregation or not, but I liked it a lot. You see, I think most of us are a bit confused by the ascension of Jesus. We aren't sure what it's about or what it means. Well, the truth is, I think, that sermon captured the heart of it. The ascension is about Jesus returning to heaven to rule all of creation. It is the crowning achievement and glorification of Jesus that began on the cross, went through the empty tomb, and now culminates with Jesus' authority over everything. It's an important event. And unfortunately, since the actual day happens on a Thursday, about 6 weeks after Easter, most of the time it slips our notice. We are continuing to look at things the risen Jesus said, and I think these words have special resonance in our lives. All the words of Jesus are important, of course, but the words he said after his resurrection were said by our victorious Lord, and that makes a difference. Perhaps we listen with more attentive ears. Perhaps we should. Today's words of Jesus come from the end of the Gospel of Matthew, and they have the same point as the ascension does. Jesus said, "All authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me." There's an old joke about a grandmother and her grandson watching the sunset. The sky was filled with reds, oranges, and purples in a beautiful display. The grandmother said, "Look what God painted." Her grandson answered, "And to think he did it all with his left hand." The grandmother was confused and said, "What do you mean?" Her grandson replied, "Well, Jesus is sitting on his right hand." We may chuckle at that, but the point is well taken. After his resurrection, Jesus sits enthroned over earth and heaven. This is an interesting concept in our world where so many compete for authority. Not long ago, I saw some good Facebook theology which said something along the lines of, sometimes being a good Christian meant being a bad Roman. So before you accuse people of being unpatriotic, ask yourself which empire they're actually serving. The point of that is not about patriotism. The point of that is about serving God's kingdom. The point is about Jesus having all authority. Jesus still rules. We may hear many voices clamoring for our attention and allegiance, but there is truly only one voice we are to listen to. Jesus said, "All authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me." A major part of the word authority is the word author. Many years ago, my father wrote a prayer for my brother's wedding that my sister also used, and then Nan and I used it as well. My children used it too, as did many of their cousins. I often remember the first line, "Eternal Father, the author of the words I love you." The authority of Jesus has love as its foundation. His love for us, His invitation for us to live in love for one another. One day, Jesus will return from heaven. Until that time, in our broken world, what's the good news? Jesus still rules. Thanks for watching, and remember to let this day belong to God.